All right, Philip, my old prosthetic limb. How are you this evening?
I'm good.
What's
I'm
going
good.
on?
I guess it's afternoon, isn't it?
It's morning somewhere. It's evening.
Yeah.
The Terminator always, the dance moves on.
How's it going, man? I hadn't talked to you in a while.
I just got out of court. I'm a free man, and you're not sick anymore. This was supposed to be a Pi Day interview, but things happen. Life comes up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting evolution in what's been happening recently with psychedelic therapy. I want to get your take on this because we were having a conversation about it, and you had a very mind-blowing, succinct line, which was they're appropriating indigenous wisdom and killing it in the process. And I wanted to open the floor up and just let you expound on that. Just go ahead, you know?
All right. I'm not a big one, to pull the appropriation card, mainly because I think that's really what America is about. Nobody says we're appropriating Arabic culture when we use algebra. It's just, I think in
That's
America,
a good point.
we it's a melting pot of cultures, and appropriation, I think, starts to become an issue when the culture that is being appropriated is not respected in the way they respect it. That's not.
So the things that were important to them are being completely overlooked.
Right.
Like the mystical, the ritual. So what we're talking about, for people that don't know, is that psychedelic therapy is getting a lot of traction now, and that the clinical practitioners are trying to find a way to take away the visionary aspect of the experience in order to put it on a sort of microdose clinician spectrum. And sure, it might help people, but what we're talking about is that they're going to destroy the very thing that makes it mystical in the first place. So yeah, go.
Is they want to destroy any mystical aspect because the mystical is inexplicable. It's mysterious. But the name of the game with psychedelics, if you're sitting in a sterile office with a person who has virtually no experience with these things, probably none, and the only reason that they're even in this game is so they can charge you $3 or $4 grand to babysit you mushrooms. I mean, that's the lowest of the low when we're talking about psychedelic sacraments.
Yeah, they aren't a shaman,
right? And all of the safeguards. The reason they ritualize the stuff in indigenous cultures to begin with is because these are safeguards. Taboos are set in place for a reason. And now, granted, the guys at Harvard, Leary and Alpert, the first thing that they really figured out, like they wrote in the psychedelic experience, was that this stuff is predicated on set and setting. All they're saying is what the indigenous have already been saying, that it's ritual. Set and setting is the control is ritual. So
I can see how that can be construed. Set and setting is simply what you're talking about is the ritual aspect of the experience. That is set and setting.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, it seems so mind-blowing to people who aren't just immersed in this culture, psychedelic culture. But yeah, that's all they were doing, is rediscovering something pretty obvious. And my problem too isn't the microdose. I mean, psychedelics have been being microdosed by these indigenous cultures.
Right. That was where I was kind of confused, because I know that you've microdosed before, especially, to help your recovery after you had that car wreck. And I've been considering that myself because I had a concussion recently. And it's like, I know for a fact you respect microdosing. So your problem with this isn't that. It's much more specific.
it's specifically this trend that's happening right now where they're trying to remove the psychedelia from psychedelics and just use it for its neurogenerative properties. Now, I have no problem with those neurogenerative properties being isolated and used for people who
but they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, yeah, it's this trend. Like, I think his name. Let me see. I got some notes here. This professor Glossner that wrote a paper for the Psychedelic Press UK, all about how he went to, I'm not sure what it was, some kind of a conference, and it was all of these entrepreneurs who were doing startups, this transmutation of these psychedelic drugs into something not psychedelic. And he in the beginning, he kind of thinks this is great,
it's so backwards. Like the way we started was we met chemists, at festivals that were turning amphetamines into psychedelics. It was always the other way. It's like, what can we turn into a psychedelic? And now they're like, well, what can we turn from a psychedelic into a non-psychoactive, pharmacological, methodological, clinical, money-making thing?
Right. And again, I wouldn't have so much problem with that, except to say that
sorry, I threw you off. I threw you off a little bit.
I want to use my words carefully.
You're right. Yeah, this is important. And it was your succinct language that made me think, oh, we got to do an interview about this, because I don't think anyone has said it so perfectly. So that's like, I think it's your moment. Like, let it out, lay it out.
Well, I think Glossner says it this way, that anytime the word psychedelic came up, it was used as a pejorative. And the tendency among these entrepreneurs, like who there's this Shlomi Rock, who is the CEO of a company called Eleusis.
I've heard of that.
He uses the word psychedelic as a pejorative. This is a bad thing. We have to get rid of it. And the same thing with this.
Like, that's the problem with it. Like,
right. That's a negative side effect. And
a side effect.
Recently, Hamilton Morris did an interview with Joe Rogan where he was talking about the scheduling of drugs in the U.S. has nothing to do with their dangerousness. For example, you don't see aconite or monkshood or any of these poisons being scheduled. You only see plants and drugs that have quote unquote side effects such as euphoria and out of body experiences. And that's listed as side effects on some of these ketamine derived.
Yeah. Not disassociatives, not depressants, not anything like that.
Right.
Interesting.
And when we talk about appropriation, a good example is this Doug Drysdale, who is the CEO of a company called Cybin, which I fucking hate that name because he's probably never done a healthy dose. But here's a quote from him. He says, "I see psychedelics as pharmaceuticals waiting to be developed." That irked the shit out of me. And it speaks to his own complete ignorance in regard to what these things do. The notion that a counselor can sit there with you and charge you thousands of dollars to guide you through a trip. The person on the psychedelics, they're superior to that counselor in that setting. Their mind has transcended the limitations that the counselor.
Yes. And this was the whole issue with trying to use that as a truth serum. Like, our own government attempted to use this stuff as a truth serum. But how are you going to torture someone into telling you what you want to know when they become God sitting in your presence? Right. There's a complete disparity of consciousness there.
That's exactly right.
You become greater than the person who's trying to analyze you. Yeah.
Right. And you know this from personal experience. I mean, in the back car on the way back from Memphis in May when we were kids and we had taken all that LSD. I mean, you clicked over into that divine headspace where, for me, it's always lurking over my shoulder when I take psychedelics. Always this kind of, I'll admit it, it's like a fear. It's a fear that I know at any moment my perception can switch over to where I perceive everyone around me as puppets that I'm working, have worked my whole life, and I just managed to have this filter, this screen that keeps me from knowing that. But once you flip over into that perception, I'm sorry, you're superior to everyone around you.
Yeah,
and I mean that.
And this is the next initiation, because, and I was trying to explain this to somebody, I forget who, but after going to that place and coming back, you're not a good person.
You're not a person.
No, you're not a person. That's a good point. You see everybody as a plaything. Like,
right.
You're here for my entertainment and amusement. And it takes a long time to get over that. It really does. But once you click over,
is that it's always been this way. And sure, I do believe that revelation, that mindset, that perception is dangerous, but I think it's supposed to be dangerous. That's the safeguards that get put in place. But if you approach this stuff with an understanding that I may have an encounter with the divine and unite with the divine, and to unpack that, if you unite with the divine, you become the divine, you become God. It's not like sexual intercourse. It's two things become one, and your perception of the world is no longer that of a human. It's no longer finite. It's not limited to your personal history. And people, materialists will argue over and over, yes, it is. Everything you're experiencing is a psychological projection. I think that kind of thinking is what makes this whole, let's take the psychedelics out of psychedelics, more dangerous than the psychedelics themselves.
Expound on that, because a lot of people would say all this is a hallucination, and to which I would say to them, subjective testimony, especially in court, holds a lot of value, and in science too. And if you take away everything subjective, the things that you would learn from the other side, then you take away things like the meaning of life and all the important things.
You take away qualia. The materialists are just concerned with quantity. Everything is a aggregation of units, but qualia is not. It's not necessarily even describable. It's ineffable, but it's what defines us as humans. It's what defines our experience, and that's impossible for anyone but either a Jungian or transpersonal psychologist like Stanislav.
Even then, because each individual person's symbols may be unique. This is something I said a long time ago. I don't believe there is a recipe to enlightenment. And even if there does happen to be one that might work on most people, enlightenment comes and goes like the tide, and it's going to be very difficult to find something that works for everyone. Like that's my issue with
it's not forever. That notion that it is forever is a sham. It's just like permanent ego death. That's a sham.
Of course it is. If it was, you wouldn't know whose mouth to put the food into. If it was, your ego is going to come back. And somebody who was it? I think it was Terrence McKenna that said the ego comes back with a vengeance, because it's pretty damn proud of having died and come back to life. Yes, that's exactly right.
The egoism of those who claim ego death. I mean, it does make you, like I just said, it makes you superior to humanity, a human, and it's supposed to be a divine glimpse, but that's just it. It's a glimpse. It's not a permanent plateau that you attain. I was about to say Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma, the famous Freemason, he says enlightenment is not isolation on a mountaintop where you're fucking useless to everybody, including yourself. It's coming back down the mountain and going into the marketplace and dealing with the haggling, dealing with the fucking the road rage. And enlightenment is that state, it's letting that state inform behavior when we get back. That's a true enlightened being.
Fascinating. It reminds me of what Jordan Peterson said. If you want a meaningful life, then every single moment matters. I'm pretty sure Jordan's had a few psychedelic experiences. I'm almost positive. Like some of the things he says, very fascinating.
Well, he's done several lectures on DMT and Young claimed to have never done psychedelics, but
really, what about the Black Book?
But I mean, that's it's his experiences, but not allegedly not induced by psychedelics. But at the same time, when he came to the U.S. because he wanted to study with the natives, he specifically asked a peyoteist, a devout peyoteist, to be his guide, to guide him. And he spent several hours in different peyote sessions. We don't know what he did in there because we only know. But he, in a letter to another psychiatrist named Betty Grover Eisner, she was telling him that her patients are taking LSD and they're claiming these reports are very similar to some of the things you've said in your literature. And he admits to her in that paper, he says, well, there's no question that drugs like LSD and meth induce a brush with the collective unconscious. But then immediately after that, he said, but I'm not very happy about it. And you know why? Because nobody needs Young if they're taking psychedelics. Young is like, well, we'll psychedelics with this practice called active imagination, which he actually got from the Golden Dawn, what's called path working.
This was Douglas Adams. You remember? The philosophers went on strike because the computer was going to tell them the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And they were like, if it goes and just tells people the answer, then that puts us out of business, doesn't it?
That's right. And I think Young had a product to sell, just like Groff eventually did with his holotropic breathing. Holotropic breathing is just pranayama. It's been around since the Vedas. But when you package it that way and say, oh, well, I have this technique, this method,
they've done the same thing to Navy SEALs. Hyperoxygenated breathing is just pranayama yoga, people.
Right.
That's exactly what they're doing. There's no difference. You guys that are in the Navy and everyone that's like Army and, you that kind of mindset, you're doing yoga, guys. That makes you a warrior. That's warrior yoga.
It's not the full 8 limbs. It's only one.
No.
But to do proper yoga, you gotta work all 8 limbs, and that includes yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and then finally samadhi.
They went way over my head. Like I'm specialized in pranayama. That's what I've been working on for a long time, and then Keir died. But
rest in peace.
Yeah.
But the point I was making is that I wanted to make that point because I don't want to reduce yoga to a Navy SEAL practice, but at the same time, I want
I don't either.
What SEALs are doing is one of the limbs of yoga, and it's been around since probably before writing.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a trend too. It becomes like a hierarchical status thing, almost like a Tesla or an iPhone. It's like, do you remember all the people having their Kabbalah bracelets and stuff years ago? And it becomes a bit of a trend. And I kind of worry that's what psychedelics are going to turn into when it becomes this whitewashed, and it is whitewashed because a lot of there's a neo-colonialism that's in this. And you hit the nail on the head with the appropriation of wisdom and then killing the indigenous cultural wisdom in the process. That is neo-colonialism. That's what that is.
I agree. And it is that tendency to say, I know better than you. And if you want to do this, you got to come through me. And if you do it outside of this context, you might go to prison. And if you don't, you will definitely be stigmatized. And that's the real problem. This, like at Oregon right now, they just had their graduation of students going into this medicalization of psychedelics thing. And that's the one where they're talking about actually cost 3 and 4.
Say that again. You're breaking up a tiny bit. Say that again. It's what they call what?
It's the one that's this Oregon, this class of graduates in Oregon for this whole program of the medicalization of psychedelics. But they're literally talking about charging $3,000 and $4,000 for a psilocybin mushroom experience that your insurance won't cover. And I don't know where the fuck they get off even thinking that's okay, you know?
Dude, that upsets me, like deep down.
And the professor,
the source does not like that. That is wrong. You know that too.
She got on Twitter and posted this tweet. She said, so who are all these misanthropes? She called us. Who are all these misanthropes that want our project to fail? That was her question. Like, I can't remember her name, but it'll come to me in a minute. But she's called them
wow,
misanthropes when she's the one literally thinking in the back of her mind, oh yeah, $3,000 and $4,000 a patient. You know how much psilocybin costs? As much as a cow turd.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pathetic. And you saw my comment back to her when I said, you know, real healing, it takes place in the jungles, in the fields, and in the deserts. It doesn't take place in the presence of a horde of fucking vampires that are ready to seize on you like vultures because you're having a psychosis or a neurosis and they've got the golden ticket to the mushroom.
Yeah, I saw you were upset and I didn't have the time to research into what it was that you were upset about with her, but I'm glad that you're getting a chance to like explain that comment to her, because it was I could feel the what would you call it? I guess vitriol. Like it was it's a righteous anger that is coming out at these people. And it's justified, I think. But yeah, explain that a little bit more. Like what exactly they're doing that's so wrong? Because some people would say, well, it's a good thing. It's helping depression.
That was some of the comments. Somebody said, well, if ketamine treatments help someone with depression, why do you care? And I'm like, number one, ketamine ain't a fucking psychedelic. Ketamine is some man-made something. It doesn't even originate in nature. At least LSD requires natural precursors to produce it. But when we're going to glorify ketamine over anything else as the golden trick to get rid of depression, guess what?
Depression, of all the things I've seen you do, I've seen you take basically every psychedelic dissociative there is, and then make a few at the same time. The only one that ever scared me was ketamine, because you blacked out and fell down the stairs. That really, I was like, what is this stuff? You know, I refused to take it after that.
It's not a healthy drug, and it's extremely addictive. Anyone who wants to try ketamine, take a step back and go read the works of John C. Lilly. Read what happened to him when he got so addicted that he was shooting himself up while he was already on it. He had got so used to getting the dose, and he's doing it with float tanks to make contact with what he called ECHO, the Earth Coincidence Control Office. That's laudable, you know, that's a laudable thing. He didn't know he would get addicted. So he finds out, oh, well, there's this other dissociative. Maybe I can use it instead. It's supposedly not as addictive. Turns out to be PCP. And he ends up having a bike wreck and goes into a coma.
Wow.
That's DM Turner is his pen name. His real name was Joseph Vivian. He passed away doing ketamine in his bathtub, trying to float like Lily was floating, and he died. He drowned.
Wow.
It was 2 weeks before anyone found him. And his favorite drug was mescaline. And he had gotten addicted to ketamine, so he stopped doing ketamine. And he would only do it to reward himself if he did something really great. And he decided one day he was going to mix mescaline and ketamine. And the figure from mescaline, he calls Mescalito from the Don Juan books, completely chastised him for this. Said, you don't bring this, he called it a Frankenstein molecule. You don't bring this Frankenstein molecule in my space. And later Joseph Vivian said that he'd never do it again, although he did. But he said, it's a Frankenstein molecule because it walks like a psychedelic, it talks like a psychedelic, but it's fucking dead. There is no spirit there. There is no conscious intelligence there. I agree with that 100%. And I think that's probably the reason the medical establishment is so intent on pushing ketamine over anything else. And it's the mere fact that ketamine doesn't work, as we're seeing with these clinics shutting down all over the country that pop up like mushrooms.
And then Pfizer's coming out with a ketamine nasal spray.
Right.
What the fuck?
Johnson and Johnson has one.
Oh, is it Johnson and Johnson?
Yep.
They'll probably both have one. They'll probably be competing.
It's called Spravato. And it says on the thing, it says serious side effects include, quote, feeling disconnected from yourself, your thoughts, feelings, space, and time. Guess what, Johnson and Johnson? That's the name of the fucking game. And people,
it's not a side effect.
And the real problem with Americans is we take anything and we turn into a therapy. We turn it into basically a day at the spa. And what many Americans and Westerners in general don't understand is that life ain't a fucking piece of cake. And it's supposed to be, there's supposed to be moments of despair and depression. And it's probably an indication that you need to make some changes in your life instead of run and take the magic pill.
This is the long, dark tea time of the soul. That's what Douglas Adams called it. If anybody wants to have a look into truly the genius that psychedelics can give you, read all of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide. And it's so full of genius. I always come back to it.
Mike Crowley, he used to work at a radio station, I believe in Cardiff, and he did, I think, sound effects. And the very first, I think it was a radio show that they did out of Hitchhiker's Guide. Douglas Adams showed up at the studio, and he said he came walking in like this giant, really tall, and he had long hair like down to his ass. And I think he even said he had like a leather band around his head or something. I was thinking, not what Douglas Adams looking like, but after the fact I thought, that actually kind of does make sense.
Well, his original story with how he came about with the idea, he said he was drunk in Germany. I think it was Germany, and there was a deaf and dumb convention in town, but he didn't know it. So everyone he was talking to didn't understand him and couldn't even hear him or anything like that. And so he said what he did was find a cow field and went and got drunk in the cow field looking up at the sky. I think he did something else in the cow field. I think he found some mushrooms, tripped out, and had his big moment of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy instead of a Hitchhiker's Guide to Germany, where nobody could help him because they were all deaf and dumb. You know?
I don't know if the mushrooms we pick on cow grow in Germany. I have to check and see. I know out in Britain, for example, they don't get those. They get psilocybe similanciata, the Liberty caps, the ones that grow in.
I've never had those.
Me either. I got
those the tall ones with the little caps that have striations.
Yep.
See, Steve was telling we call him Steve. Our dad was telling us about taking those in the 70s, and we didn't believe him. We were like, those aren't, because at the time neither one of us had ever heard of those things. We were like, that's not what they look like. They look like a breast. They got a golden nipple. There's a skirt. Blah blah blah. He's like, no, they look like these little umbrellas. I'm like, you're crazy. It was. I remember that.
He was definitely buying those from someone, and they were everywhere back then. And even fake ones. I read about how mushrooms were so popular in the late 60s and 70s. People would go to the grocery store, buy some mushrooms, dry them out, then drop LSD and sell them as
Wow, that would work. Portobello.
But, the dark night of the thing, that's a real part of life. And if you haven't gone into your longing, into your despair, that's Peter Kingsley puts it that way. You have to sit with your longing, and not try to
especially men. They need to initiate themselves into the shadow to become the monster. Otherwise, you have no force for good in this world. Like, what are you? Like, this is how you sort yourself out.
They already are the monster. This is the process of becoming conscious of your monster.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It irks the shit out of me, man. And I'm slow to use the cultural appropriation thing, because I
No,
don't
hit
and
them with
if
their no,
you're
fight fire with fire. These
if
people,
you're
that's what they're doing. These are the university assholes. Like you have to fight fire with fire. That's the angle.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just when I do any of these things, granted, when we were kids, we were gung-ho, we were experimenting, we thought about it largely like Andre Baton did with the surrealism, that these psychedelics were a means to explore creativity and make art. But I learned real quick that at some point that stops, and you start dealing with real spiritual dilemmas. God, the soul, your place in the fucking world, your relationships with people,
Yeah.
all of the things transcend art, as grand as art is. And I think the safeguards that are put in place by these cultures for these substances, they exist for that reason.
Yeah, the
And
shaman is a better gatekeeper than a therapist who's never had the drug, or the other flip side of that coin, which is almost even worse, is some trendy new age shaman wannabe therapist who's going to compare all his own trips with yours and not guide you through the space like he should properly. It's like, oh well, when I went there, like when went where precisely? How do you know? You know what I
yeah,
mean? You're not in touch with that ancient
psychi-
wisdom.
psychiatrists are not our modern Westerners shaman. They are not shamans in the least. They are I,
Charlatans.
that's probably the best term. And I love psychology. I've read all of Freud. I've read all of Jung's collected works. I've read Adler and Silberer and Spielrein and Rank. I mean, I love psychology, but where psychedelics begin, psychology ends. There's nothing you can do to help another person that's in that state except for make sure they don't fucking hurt themselves or somebody else.
Yeah,
The
they have to set themselves right. And you can
Groff,
give you help. Yeah, you can help them
Stanislav
in with.
Grof, he said, whenever he was the one that was in Czechoslovakia, was giving his patients LSD, and he wrote this great book called Realms of the Human Unconscious, documenting all of this. But the first thing he demanded of even his nurses was, you have to sit down and take that at least 3 times before you even begin to understand what they're going through. And you've got these modern doctors, these modern practitioners.
That's exactly right. 3 times. I would
Right.
agree with that.
And the modern folks are saying, oh no, you don't have to have experience with it to be sit with someone. Bullshit.
Where do they get off saying that? Where is their citation? Where's their reference? Where's their
they are the citation.
balls?
They make it up, and once they say it, it's the citation. They don't have to cite anything. Establishment, and they're literally making it up as they go. As long
so it's three times is right. So the first time it's fun. You're gonna have fun. You're gonna laugh. The second time is going to be introspective. You're going to think. And the third time is going to be serious. And it's going to get transcendental if you let it. If you run away from that and fall into the fear of death, you're going to have a bad trip. That's what a bad trip is. Usually it's your third trip, and you don't walk over that threshold.
Right. And it's natural to fear death. It is a death. And fear, I think, is supposed to come with that. It's not that we shouldn't fear it. It's that we should be fucking men and have the courage to face it. And that's what's being thrown out the window.
That's what changed me as a person. I realized all this is an very intricate illusion. Oh, it's a prison. Oh, I get it. Done. I'm done then. I give this breath to someone else. You can have it. Have fun with it. And I allowed the source to take me. And then it was and I'm going to go over at some point, step by step, what that was like. Still don't feel like I'm ready. And it's been 20 years. People they're saying they had the experience yesterday and they're so enlightened. You have no idea. Wait till 2 decades have passed. Digest it, really.
Right.
Like, this is something that changes you forever.
Right. And I like Alan Watts, you know, I don't necessarily agree with this, but he said, you get the message, you hang up the phone. And there's something to it, but I don't think everyone gets the message after the first time. After the
I
100th.
did. Do you remember I took acid again and went to the nothing. That was the fourth time. And that's when I wrote on my hand with a permanent magic marker, never eat acid again. I said, if I do ever get a tattoo, it'll be that and it'll be on my hand. So I will remember I've had this lesson and now I will never forget. And that's when it was solidified in me forever, was the fourth trip when I went to the nothing, you know, and that's a place you don't want to go. That's not the place you want to be.
The nose of the airplane. That's what it looks like to me. But it's and regarding that Watts quote, Dennis McKenna replied to it at one point. He continued it and he said, well, it's not an answering machine, it's a dialogue. And I think that's important too, is to know when to hang up the phone, and also when it's time to pick it back up and start the dialogue.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with now. So 2 decades have passed and I'm like, well, is it time to pick the phone back up? You know? And if you're not, there should be such a trepidation in your gut about this. It is a serious thing. This is a tool. It's not a toy. That's what I keep telling my daughter. It's like, one day you're going to try psychedelics. It's the family business at this point, Vivi, you know, and it's a tool, not a toy. And you're going to have to treat it with much respect, you know, and it's not something you're going to do with your friends out and about, you know, like, let's have a set and setting, you know, let's have this. It's at some point, you know, maybe when she's in her 20s, I'm thinking 25, that's when your frontal cortex is fully developed. We probably should have waited. We were a little precocious, a little rambunctious.
A little early to start with. But I was just telling Bacchus, not about psychedelics, but I was trying to explain to him. I took him out to the swamp, out deep in the woods, and you know, he kept doing things that were dangerous, and I had to tell him. I said, "Look, buddy, you fuck with nature. Nature always wins. You play with nature, you will lose." And that's precisely what we're talking about with the psychedelic experience. It's nature in its full glory. You know, when you said earlier about how you just surrender and you give it all away.
Nature's oppressive. You have to submit.
I think we're always in that state. We just deny it. We are in denial about our total lack of willpower. We have virtually no control over our experience. The most we can control is the way we react to our experience. But psychedelics force you to admit that. They force you to say, there's nothing I can do to change this right now. The best I can do is not react terribly and cause another domino to fall.
And that's better than years of therapy, which I can personally attest to. So because I've been going through different marital things and a lot of different things. And when I finally narrowed down all of the months of training, let's say, into basically Hakuna Matata, you know, find a happy place. Sometimes bad things are happening all around you and there's nothing you can do about it. So why worry? And she was kind of upset at me for sort of a reductionist philosophy of her years of training. But at the same time, you know, I'm sitting here telling her things like comparison is the thief of joy. And she wrote that on her wall. That was on her wall for 6 months. You know, I was bringing in lessons to her because all she could tell me was Hakuna Matata. And this is what we're talking about. The therapist, especially one that hasn't had these deep experiences, they're not in a position to guide you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's
Hakuna Matata.
I mean, I think philosophy begins and ends with this stuff, and about therapy and psychologists. When Timothy Leary finally got the opportunity to go down to Mexico and to take the psychedelic, to take psilocybin mushrooms with Maria Sabina, when he came out of that, he said, I just learned more about psychology in those 4 hours than in my entire career as a psychologist. And this is a Harvard psychologist. People forget that about Leary. He wasn't just some schmo. He was a Harvard psychologist. Granted, I think psychologists are kind of schmoes anyway, but if they're going to be good ones, or at least worth listening to,
his credentials were in check.
That's right. And if he's going to say, I learned more about that in the 4 hours of a psilocybin trip than in my entire career as a psychologist, you better.
That's amazing.
I mean, they're the ones that came up with the setting thing. The modern medical establishment is so gung ho about the set and setting thing. Well, guess what? That Leary said that, and he also said you were useless in the face of mushrooms. But they won't admit that part. They just kindly omit that. And he was the first to admit that it's just a game. Everything we do is just different roles in a game we're playing, including the psychiatrists. They just get paid better. They're whores is what they are. They are.
Okay.
If you want to help somebody, help them. And I concede to the notion that people don't appreciate something they're handed for free, but $3,000 and $4,000 for one session, that's completely transcended the realm of.
It's worse than being a whore. Being a whore is the oldest profession, prostitution. They're pimping out the psychedelic as a whore.
Yeah, I'm not.
That's what they're doing.
Whores are bad or wrong.
No.
What they are.
There's a certain respect that goes into that profession, but the person that's not respected is the pimp. What they're doing is pimping the psychedelic.
That's a great point. Yep, that's a perfect way to look at it. I'm glad you said that, because they are more like pimps, whores. They're whoring us out. They're whoring our fucking minds out. It's a big experiment, and they have no idea what's going to happen any more than you have before you take the psychedelic. They just have a bunch of guesses, and if it doesn't go that way, guess what? They've got some benzos they can shoot you up with.
Right. Try a different pharmacological, and just you might have to deal with the withdrawal effects from that might last a few years, and then we'll try another one.
It might kill you. Best case scenario, you'll have seizures when you get off that.
Oh, you had brain zaps? Oh, well, maybe we shouldn't try that one again,
Right. That's the boost bar line.
I'll never take that again. Woo.
That's what they say. You might get brain zaps, but you get used to it. That's the worst feeling in the world. I've experimented with boost bar. I've never been prescribed it, but I've experimented with anything psychoactive. I try to at least come to an understanding of it. One of my heroes is Haldane. He would never give his patients a drug he hadn't taken himself. He thought that was unethical. And that's courage.
Right.
That's courage. That's right. That's honor. This whole notion of, well, let's test patients, try it on them and see what happens. Try it on yourself.
Fucking cowardly.
If you're so convinced it'll work, you take it. And that's really the crux of this is we all have to take it. We all have to, meaning the psychedelics. I do think that there's a place and time for psychedelics for every person. They might never find it in their life. It might escape them, just escapes some people. But it is an integral part of the human experience. And in that regard, it's safe. It might be scary. You might do something.
There's no other way to kill the child and let the man be born. And for men, especially, the initiation aspect of it, especially for men, is truly important. They need to go through this. How do you go through death and the process of death without actually dying? This is a big deal, and one of the secrets of the ages. and we have it, and it's in our hands, and they're trying to whitewash it. They're trying to water it down into something that doesn't do what it's supposed to.
Right. I'm all for neurogenesis and people who need it.
I shouldn't be the rare one. I should not be the odd one out that I've been to the Godhead. This should be a common thing, Instead, like, I'm the oddity. I'm an absurdity. And the things I talk about, people are like, oh, well, Michael's just crazy. No, Michael's the one-eyed man. That's all I can say. And when it's like the one-eyed man is not king, at all. It's an absurd place we live in.
Hang on, I'm losing you.
It's a beautiful day out here. Glorious day.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you?
I'm outside at the house.
Man, it looks like a park. You guys have a wonderful little stretch of land out there.
Yeah, it's nice. This property is where Rebecca's grandfather grew up. And it's been in her family for over 100 years. And this is the property we're working on, changing some things, fixing it up. And
what would be great is sort of a Newman psychedelic preserve like McKenna has in Hawaii, of all the native types and varieties that are in that area, and just keep them grow, have a little greenhouse, keep them growing there.
Something like that started, but so far it's just with acacias. They flew me out to Australia to give a lecture, and Australia is there are more acacias in Australia than anywhere else in the world. And
really? I thought Africa had the most.
Australia, there are so many. I mean, everywhere.
That's fascinating.
Back with probably 25 different species, seeds for them. So we've got, let me see, can you see this small grove of trees right there? Pine trees. Those are going to come down.
What?
Those are coming down, and they're just loblolly pine. I mean, those things grow so fast and take over so fast that they're, if we wanted to plant more, we could and use them within our lifetime. But that's the space that's going to become the acacia grove, and we're going to grow all these different the ones we can, get them to grow here. So our acacia that grows in America is called Acacia americana, and it's been reclassified as Gleditsia triacanthos. And that acan, tree acanthos, that root is the same root as acacia. It means thorn, acacia, or acacios.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I keep finding around the different burial mounds. Every single Native American
isn't that from the Latin of the same root as cornucopia, the horn and thorn?
I don't know about that. I don't know enough Latin. I know more about
copia, copious, plenty. So the horn of plenty, cornucopia. So it seems like horn and thorn have some kind of similarity. I'm going to take a Latin class because I love looking at the roots of the etymology.
It'd be smart. Tom Hatsis taught himself Latin, and he told me at one point that was the best time he ever spent. I taught myself Hebrew, when I was
remember
deep into Kabbalah, but I've never had any use for it outside of Kabbalistic studies. I think I'd probably be wiser. Right now, I'm trying to learn.
Done with fish. Right.
Yeah,
you did it. You did it.
I still love it.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you do with that expertise?
Well, nothing when you're not by yourself. I mean, it's largely, it's largely an introverted practice. Even the extroverted side of it is straight Judaism. And of course, I'm not Jewish and I have no intention of becoming Jewish. Oh, I guess you don't become Jewish. I have no intention of converting to Judaism.
Well, we have the nose. That's for sure.
That's true. We do have the nose. And the Newman, I get asked sometimes, Newman, are you Jewish? And,
maybe. I don't know.
No, it didn't come up in the DNA test. You know, but right now I'm trying to learn Spanish. And
dude,
I
have tried. Good luck. Everything is backwards, and the whole thing about the masculine and feminine makes you
genderized.
It's like if there's a group of children and they're all girls, it's called one thing. If one boy walks up, it's different now because there's a boy there. If there's a group of boys, it's called one thing. If a man walks up, it's different now. Okay. If there's a group of men there and a policeman walks up, it's different now. It's because levels of masculine authority. It's like, and then the syntax structure is backwards. And it's like, I could not wrap my head around it. I'm not a polyglot. You know, my gifts are in math and science and patterns and things. You're a word guy, a writer. You might be able to have an easier time with it. But God, it was hard. It was very difficult. And my wife is Spanish, you know.
Right.
I couldn't, she's from Monterrey, straight up. I've been to Mexico twice. Still can't speak Spanish.
You know, and it's the region. Spanish is regional, and it changes with the region. And the specific region that I'm concerned with is Cuba, because I'm receiving what's called my rayamiento and Palo Cambisa, which is a branch of Palo Mayombe, a type of variety of Palo Mayombe. But everything is in this Cubanized Spanish that is blended with the Bantu religion, this Congolese language. So it's not even
the African.
Yeah, it was
the Bantu.
It's the Bantu Congolese religion when it got imported into Cuba during the diaspora.
Oh, right. And isn't this like the real roots of voodoo?
Well, both voodoo and Palo have their roots in the Congo.
Okay, so it's branches.
It's like hoodoo. Most of the slaves.
Hoodoo.
So
there's hoodoo and voodoo.
Yep. I went with the slaves that made southern states in the U.S. That's largely what hoodoo grew out of. They also call it conjure, and it existed mainly in Mississippi, lower, and in the what they call the Gullah Geechee area and around the Carolinas and on the coast. But most of the slaves that were imported to that region were from the Congo. Now in Cuba, it was kind of equal. They were from Congo and Nigeria, Yoruba land. So it's from the Yoruba tradition that we get Santeria, the one with the Orisha worship. So
yeah, sublime. Love that song.
And in Cuba, the tendency is to do both. You do Palo and then you do Santeria. So they're kind of seen in the same way as Rada and Petwo are in voodoo. Voodoo, you have Rada is the public kind of what's been called the nice face of voodoo, and then you have Petwo, which was the fiery aspect of it, and it's what was behind the slave revolts that gave Haiti back to the people. But that's kind of how Palo works in relation with Santeria. Now, not every Palo is a Santo.
I gotta say, your knowledge on this is pretty impressive. And I'm your brother. I'm not easily impressed by you, you know, but Jesus.
I've been studying it pretty deeply, and I've got a really great mentor. I won't name him, but he knows who he is if he's listening. He's been an incredible inspiration and source of knowledge for me, and he's who I'm going down to see in Miami in 5 days for this initiation ritual. Which, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'm mildly terrified. Rayamiento means scratching, and you've seen voodoo veves, the kind of the symbols that they'll draw in chalk or in cornmeal or eggshells. They're kind of geometric. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
When we get it done here, just look up VEV.
Yeah, well, share do a tweet about it so I can like see exactly what you're talking about.
I posted the Veve of Damballa yesterday because his feast day is the same day as St. Patrick. So if you get on I think it's on my Instagram, you can see what a Veve looks like. It's the one of Damballa in particular. But the scratching, they call it that because they carve these symbols into your body to impress.
You're not gonna. All right, this
you.
reminds me of when you were gonna trepan yourself. Are you gonna get branded
I was
or
never
something?
And myself. This is like you sound like on Ghostbusters. That would have worked if you hadn't stopped me. No, Amanda Fielding, love you, but no, I was never going to cut a hole in my head. I got to meet Amanda in York. She's the one in that documentary, A Hole in the Head. I don't know if you've seen it, but she literally, man, she pulled out the drill, climbed up on the sink, and
oh my God,
went to town.
Now the thing you were talking about once, where you were saying, yeah, I'm gonna forget who and what I am and have to learn how to be a man again over the process of 5 days. That I was worried about.
That's the ibogaine, and that's the high. That's what happens, and that's a
Congolese. Please don't do that.
Our blood, we descend from freed slaves from Cameroon, and Cameroon is the region where ibogaine it's a natural religion. It's called Bwiti, the Bwiti cult. But that's on our roots, man. That's part of why I'm not afraid of it. Granny's mother was a freeman. She received that name because she was the last visibly black person in our family. She had dark skin. Her hair was like black people's hair. But after that, as well as I do, a racist element crept in, and I think it was largely to separate. Some of our elders wanted to separate from that truth that we do descend from freed slaves. But I take that as, I'm proud to be white as much as I'm proud of my Congolese blood, and I want to respect and encounter my ancestors in some way. That's largely why I'm doing this.
Yeah, I'll never know whether or not the audience was the ancestor, like the ancestral plot, like watching from beyond. Not sure what the audience is. There's so many interesting.
It happened when it happened. You use the words monsters, aliens, and it was the overwhelming sensation that you were the star of some show.
Yeah.
And we all are, from our own perspective, we're the center of our own movies. But rarely
in another place, I got up on this stage and it's like I'm playing a solo that nobody thought would go on this long or be this good. And there are plenty of people waiting, itching to take my spot. And it's like when you, like, for instance, a blackout drunk, who's taking their position? They don't. Is it the same person, or is it someone itching to get up on stage, just waiting for their turn? Who's not quite familiar with the emotional controls of playing this person, or you know what I mean?
That's a gift. It really is a gift to have an experience at all. The odds of having an experience are much smaller than I think most of us consider. This whole process is a gift, including the despair, including the depression, and all the things we want to run from and find magic pills for. Psychedelics are a magic pill, but they're not a magic fix-it pill.
Well, Jordan Peterson said most of the time it's not a depression. It's a life complexity issue. Your life has grown too complex for you to be able to handle all the variables. What do psychedelics do? They raise your vibration. They raise your intellectual ability. In some cases, they provide an epigenetic stress that raises your IQ altogether, especially if you consider putting you in touch with your creativity and the shadow, and the computations from the shadow giving you an intuitive boost to your perception, which makes you a sort of a warrior of sight. It's like,
when we say raise,
like,
we're really talking about expansion also. To expand this means to become conscious of things you weren't previously aware of, especially in your own life and your own tendencies. In Buddhism, they call it sankhara. Your tendencies to, not necessarily what you're doing, but your tendency to do those things, your tendencies to respond to certain stimuli in certain ways that make you predictable. Other people know us better than we know ourselves most of the time when it comes to how he's going to react. We feel like we have free will and make a decision. But if you're an outsider and you're really paying attention, you know how they're going to react before they do. They really believe they're in the middle of a situation when from the outside it looks like, oh, everything is kind of made sense and panned out. But that's when you talk about raising vibration,
well, there's the switch that happens. We mentioned it earlier, when everyone around you becomes something more like a puppet, easily predicted. They're all predictable. In fact,
right.
It almost seems as though you could control them because of how predictable they are.
The sensation that you are, I mean, I have had that experience more times than I'd prefer, where.
And see, but what I'm saying is that's the secret ingredient that transcends the depression, because it's not depression, it's life complexity. You raise yourself to the ability to handle that complexity and get a grasp on it finally. And you begin to answer some of your own problems, your loose ends that you weren't able to, you weave them back together and you can create something then, like this is, and they're trying to water it down. And the whole notion of depression, for the most part, is a sham.
Yeah,
it's a life complexity issue.
life
That's all it is.
And it's the way our life communicates to us that we need to make some changes. That's what they're talking about with the set and setting. If life gets bad, guess what? You might need to change something, and that's participating in ritual really kind of opened my eyes to the profundity of the degree to which your perception can change by doing small things like lighting a candle or burning incense. As new age and silly as that sounds, if you light a candle on the outside, you're lighting a candle on the inside. Everything is a reflection of just you. In the final analysis, it's just you. It's not even just you and God. It's just you, or it's just God, if you'd rather say it that way. But I like to say, when especially to Christians, when God created the world, did he use the dirt from his backyard? No, he's not in an environment. In the final analysis, there is nothing but God, which is to say, it's just you. And that's, I think, one of the both most terrifying and most glorious things about the psychedelic experience. And to take that out and to call it a side effect is the ultimate sin. I'm sorry, it's unpardonable.
I agree. And that is a wonderful point to end it on. Excellent talk.
And I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I'm going to put it up.
Pressure up, so I need to go.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up immediately. I may have to run off to work, but it should be up today. So,
well, cool.
Catch you later, man.
I love you. Good to talk to you.
You too. Later.